everyone. It is Thursday afternoon, which means it's time for a little break. Today, we are doing a book on business. As you know, if you've been joining me for these Facebook Lives, I've been alternating between mindset books and business books, because as far as I'm concerned, if you get things right between your two ears and you have the right methods and tools, you can do anything, including get to $1 million in revenues. Great to see you guys again, and thanks for joining me these last few weeks for Facebook Live. I'm really excited about today's book, which is a book on selling. Now, those of you who know me or have been in masterclass know that I actually love selling. I am one of those weird people who loves to sell. Now, why is that? I've had a chance to think about why I love selling over the last few weeks, because we've actually been working on a new sales program here at $1 Million Women. And I'll tell you more about that later this summer. But right now, I've just been reviewing some of my favorite sales books and sales programs. I've actually taken so many sales trainings over the last 10 years. Everything from Jack Daly, who has a couple of great books on sales, including Hyper Sales Growth, to the Sandler Method, if any of you know that. I got trained by several top salespeople, including in NLP and in Clients on Demand. I could go on and on. I've taken a lot of sales training. And I really love sales because at the end of the day, sales is about co-creating something. When you do sales right, you and the person you're selling to have created something that is more than the sum of its parts. And that is what is really exciting to me about sales. So one of the reasons this book resonated with me, it's the only sales guide you'll ever need, and it's full of Post-its and my pencil because I've been finding all my favorite parts to share with you, is that Anthony Iannarino, and I hope I'm saying his name right, sorry Anthony if I'm not, but Anthony Iannarino share a love of mindset, a love of focusing on building out your skills, and of making really complex things sort of simple and teaching them to you in bite-sized chunks. So before I dig into the sales book that we're doing today, I'm going to take my shot because that's what I always do on Thursdays at 3. This is called the book shot because I've read all these books you see behind me, and I have about twice as many in my bedroom. And I'm going to be sharing them with you bit by bit in these Facebook Lives. But you may not have time to read all these books. So every week I will bring you a book in the time it takes to do a shot. And in that spirit, today I'll be taking my shot of I don't know what, because Laura never tells me what it is. Here we go. Last week it was really gross, so you owe me a good one this time. Beer. Well, that's better than a maple Chavez Royale, whatever thing was you gave me last week with the Sprite. That's pretty good. All right. Well, in the spirit of July 4th, I'll continue the party today and drink my beer. Hope you all had a great July 4th. And let's dig in and talk about this sales book and what it can teach you. So the first thing that Anthony Iannarino says is that he started out being very resistant to the idea of doing sales because he thought sales was something you did to someone instead of something you did with and for someone. And that's a really important distinction. In fact, I'm going to read to you exactly how he wrote it. He said, I refused to go into sales initially. He had a manager sort of tapping him and saying, hey, you should be in sales. You're really good at this. Believing that selling was something you did to someone, not for and with someone. And I couldn't agree more that if you are approaching sales like, how do I get this person to do what I want them to do? Well, it necessarily feels pushy, sleazy, like you're out of integrity. And these are all things I hear from women I work with who don't love selling. And, I will tell you right up front that my goal today in these 15 minutes is to help you love selling just a little bit more. I'm thinking that if we can do that, that you will be able to see much better results right away when you get on your next sales call or go to your next sales meeting. So when you start approaching sales from this new perspective, which is something you do for and with someone, it's much more about service and less about trying to, trick someone into doing something. And if you think about it, the reason we tend to think of sales as pushy or sleazy or insincere is that there's been a way of selling in America for decades, which has a lot to do with what you picture when you picture a salesperson. Like, the guys selling encyclopedias or the vacuum cleaners door to door, who would hope that someone would open the door just this much and they would shove their foot in, right? And then try to get in the door and sell as hard and as fast as they could and get you to buy something. That's very much trying to do something to someone. Now there are new sales methods that say all of that needs to go out the window. Why does it need to go out the window? Well, one, it's outdated and it's aggressive and it's Doesn't work anymore. Two, we live in a world where we are being sold to all day long. I was just at the supermarket yesterday stocking up for July 4th, and there were screens up I was being sold to. I opened up my phone to check, a new cool video. I'm seeing an ad. I get on the elevator. There's another ad in there. All day long we're being sold to in a way that never was the case. They used to say it took like 3 to 5 touches to someone with an ad before they'd get interested and maybe consider buying something. Now, studies show you have to hit someone 7 to 10 times with the same message before they even consider buying your product or service. So our buyer's defense, which is just a fancy way of saying our kind of resistance to being sold anything, is like up to here. It's way, way, way high now. So how do we get around that buyer's defense wall? Well, what we can do is have a totally new approach to sales that isn't about forcing anything on anyone. It's all about serving the person you're selling to. And that's where Anthony and I are very aligned. And I think if you talk to any salespeople today who love sales or are really good at it, and that could be a salesperson, or it could be a successful CEO, or it could just be someone who's actually out raising money, that's another form of sales, you'll find we all have something in common. And it's that we really see selling as serving. So one thing that Anthony talks about in here is getting the right mindset around sales. And what that looks like is, how can I add value to the people who I think should be working with me and either buying my product or buying my services? How can I bring them consistent value so that at the time when they're actually ready to buy something, they see me as someone who brings value add, someone who can help them solve a big problem, someone who will be an advocate for them. That's really what selling is all about. And what he does in this book is break it down into really easy to implement systems. So really at the end of the day, being a good salesperson is really about mindset, method, and knowing how to close. And he covers all three in this book. I know from teaching my own sales workshops that once you get the mindset right, where you're seeing selling as service, not as doing something to someone, and then you learn a method, and there are some great methods out there, including some of the ones I said I studied along the way building Little Pim, and I also just created my own method, which you'll hear more about later this summer. That really gives you a huge sense of confidence when you're going into a sales meeting, that you're not winging it. I hear from so many entrepreneurs that I can get the meeting, but I can't always make the sale. And that's usually because they're making up on every single meeting how to close the deal, when there are real methods around that. And the last thing I mentioned of the three things you have to get right is the closing, because you can actually get a lot of meetings and not close the deal. I see this all the time with women I'm working with who are fundraising, and they're meeting with angels and VCs, they're getting these meetings. As we like to say, we women who coach other women in the fundraising world, you'll get the meeting because frankly, a lot of investors are sick of meeting with guys in hoodies, right? They'd like to hear from you. You're different, you're fresh, you're a woman, but will you get the check? And what really matters is getting the check. So back to this closing tactics. Hey, Carol. Hey, Pam. Hey, Laura. Here on page 126 of this wonderful book, which if you're just joining us, is the only sales guide you'll ever need by Anthony Iannarino, who breaks down step by step how to have the right mindset and the right methods and the right closing tactics so that you can sell better and sell more consistently. So he talks about the 10 commitments needed to close a sale. And I'm going to focus on closing for a minute because I've noticed in working with women over the years that women tend to get stuck on the close. They feel like they're being too pushy, or there are too many objections. They can't get over the objections the person has. They maybe leave the meeting not so sure what the next steps are. Oh, I think that went really well, they say, but then 2 weeks later, there's no follow-up meeting and the closing isn't really happening. So let's focus on that a minute. And Anthony says that you actually need 10 commitments to close a sale. A little bit like the 10 commandments, right? Well, these are the 10 commandments of closing. First of all, you need them to commit all the way along the way, not just at the very end when they're saying, sure, we'd love to buy your product or service. And let me just read you quickly what he says the 10 commitments are you need to get from them. The commitment of time is the first one. They have to give you the time to come present, right? Or to get on the phone with them and hear what you're all about. That's already their first yes that they're saying to you. Then you need to get the commitment to explore. If they're not going to let you ask them some questions and explore a little bit what's not working in their business, then you can't help them with your product or service. The commitment to change. This is such a big one. I always say to the women I work with, you have to want it more than I do, meaning you have to really be willing and ready to change, because as you've heard me say many times, if you want something you haven't had, you'll have to do something you've never done. And that's change, and change is not easy. So you need to get a commitment from them that yes, they want to change something in their business so that they can get a different and better result. The commitment to collaborate. This is especially important if you're selling B2B, where you have to get a lot of people to buy in. You're going to have to get them to collaborate with you in presenting this service or product you're selling all the way up the chain. Let's say you're trying to sell a brand of ice cream into Whole Foods. Well, the person you meet with might taste your ice cream and say, my God, this is fantastic. This is the best butter pecan I've ever had in my life. I feel like you just picked those pecans from the trees. They're delicious. I want this every day of my life. So they are fired up and ready to go to bat for you. But guess what? They're not the only decision maker. They now have to go convince their boss, who has to then go to the sales meeting, convince all those people. So they need to be ready to collaborate with you to do whatever it takes to get you through all these different meetings you're going to have that are going to get you to a yes. To build consensus is another commitment. That's commitment number 5. That's building consensus among all the people who are going to have to say yes in order to bring you on board. The commitment to invest. They're going to have to invest some time, energy, and yes, money to get the results. And that's why that number 3 that he talked about, the commitment to change, is so important. Because if they're not ready to change, then they're not going to commit the time, energy, resources, and money that it takes to make those changes and get those results. The commitment to review your solution. They have to be willing to take the time to take in whatever it is you offer to them. He spends a lot of the book helping you to understand how you can add value in any situation. So they have to commit that they're going to review all that and figure out what you have to offer. Hey, Stephanie. Hey, Shannon. And then numbers 8 and 9 are the commitment to resolve concerns, which means that along the way, as you explore what's working or what's not in the person's business, it's going to raise concerns for them. I know when I get on the phone with women and start talking to them about their businesses, and they say something like, well, I really want to outsource, but I've always done everything myself. Well, that's going to raise a concern for them. Well, how much is it going to cost? What if the person does a bad job? I really need someone to make phone calls for me. I know I can outsource, but how much am I going to have to pay someone who can speak really good English? I've heard there are these great virtual assistants, but I think they're all in like Asia and their English is not going to be good. So they're going to have concerns. You want to get a commitment to them from them that you can resolve those concerns together. And then the last 2 are the commitment to buy, which basically means that if you can get through all these things that they're concerned about and show them the value you can bring, that they actually are ready to buy. It's amazing how far you can get just asking someone the question, if we were able to show you that you can get 100 additional leads, would you be ready to move on that right now? Well, you'd be surprised. Some people might call you in for a meeting, but they're not ready to buy. They actually are just doing research. So sometimes finding that out can be critical to making the sale. And then the last thing is the commitment to execute, because there's nothing worse than selling something and then finding out that they're not actually using it. I know that at Little Pim, when we were selling language teaching programs to young children, we would find out that some parents were playing it for their kids every single day. And in the space of 3 months, little Janie was practically fluent in Spanish. And that felt amazing. And then we had other people write in and say, hey, this doesn't work, this language teaching program. And when we contacted them and asked, well, how many times a week are you playing it? It was like once a week or once a month. Well, yeah, it's not going to work if they only watch it once a week or once a month. So you do want to get a commitment from the people you're selling to that they are going to execute and implement your product or service in the way you want them to. And doing that isn't pushy. It's showing them that you actually take your products and services seriously. I know that I have all the women I work with sign a contract. Now, that's less because I'm worried they're going to default on me or something. It's because I want them to know that I take this super seriously. I'm going to be giving 180%, and I want them to too. I want them to see it in writing. I want them to sign it and have to send it back to me before we start. That shows a commitment to execute. So I hope some of these 10 commandments from Anthony are useful to you in closing. I will also share that when I'm working with women who are trying to learn to be better closers, they really want to know how to overcome objections. So I'm going to spend a moment on that before we run out of time here. This time always goes by way too quickly. And how do you overcome objections when you're in a sales meeting or on a sales call and the person starts saying, well, gee, that sounds like a lot of money. Here are some really good tips and tricks that you can use. One is you can ask the person, what will it cost you not to solve this? Because often the person who's giving the objection is just focusing on how much it's going to cost them, but not what is the outcome. One of my coaching clients was recently trying to pitch to some real estate developers, and they came back to her with, wow, your consulting fee, gee, $10,000 a month, that's a lot of money. But when we broke it down, I said, well, don't they have an empty building sitting there? She was like, yeah, they do. Well, how long has it been sitting there? Oh, about 3 months. How much rent do you think that they could be collecting on this thing? Gosh, I don't know. So we just did the math and did a little research, and it looked like they were losing minimum $30,000 a month just from this building sitting there empty. So if you want to preempt these objections, the best way to do that is to come in prepared and understanding what is it going to cost the client if they don't solve this problem, and then reconnect them with that at the moment that they're having the objection. Because trust me, when they get off the phone or leave the meeting, if you haven't solved that problem for them, they're just going to have to go out and find somebody else who will. Someone will come in and help them see that they can solve the problem, and they'll get the business. So why shouldn't that be you? I'll give you one more, and then it's going to be time to go. When you're overcoming objections, which are often about price, or maybe it's not the right time, it can also be really valuable to have a couple of testimonials up your sleeve that you can share. Because you saying how great you are or how great your products or services are is never going to go as far as someone else saying it about you. So you can have them ready to go in your phone. Maybe they're on your website and you have it called up to that page when you go into the meeting. Maybe they're in your social media. And at the end, when the person's, panicking a little bit, which by the way has nothing to do with you, change is scary for everyone. So when you're asking them to change, like to buy your products or services, to make a change in their business, it's going to be a little scary. That's when you can help reassure them by saying, hey, you remind me of this other client I have. And then you just pull out your phone and you say, let me read to you what they said. That can be very reassuring and can really help to overcome the objections they may be having and the fear they're having, which again, probably has nothing to do with how fabulous you are. It's just the fear of what if something goes wrong. All right, I hope that's been a little bit helpful and that I have made you love selling just a little bit more, because that was my goal. I do think that if you read this book, you'll get a great dose of the right mindset and methods and killer closing tactics that you need to make some great sales. And then keep going. There's so many great sales resources out there, and I'm creating one right now too that I'll be sharing with you later on this summer. Thanks for joining me. Hey guys, Pam, Carol, Shannon, Stephanie. Have a great afternoon. Stay cool. Bye, guys.